Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to go to Dr. Meyer and Dr. Collins with the very question that Senator Wyden has just raised, because it seems to me we're having the same debate we had back in 1996 as to whether or not we should have work incentivized in our welfare programs or whether we should just revert to cash payments to those who need assistance. Dr. Meyer and Mr. Collins, what do you say about this argument that the ARPA child tax credit changes had no impact at all on work or reducing poverty, and that we should stop focusing on the need for work in our efforts to try to help those who need the assistance?
Want me to start? Sure. So first, I want to emphasize that I'm in favor of the child tax credit. The current child tax credit incentivizes work. The proposal in Build Back Better and what was implemented in ARPA would discourage work because it would eliminate the existing CTC and replace it essentially with cash welfare paid out by the IRS. So what the evidence from the last year says, which I don't think is that informative because there were so many other policies that were implemented during the pandemic, and because it was temporary, and I don't think it was particularly well understood. I don't think it was even well understood by the authors of the two most well-known studies, I think, looking at the effects of the ARPA changes on work, because they got the timing wrong. The incentives to work changed when the bill was passed, not when the payments actually went out, because it was the elimination of the incentives under the old CTC, or the current one that we now have, that was the change in the return to work, because it's not when you get the payments that matter, it's when the change in the incentive to work happens, because, for example, we know that most people get the payments the following year, but the incentive to work occurs in the tax year where you're incentivized.
Thank you. Mr. Collins, okay, go ahead. Right. Leave a few moments. Let's leave the rest of the time then for Mr. Collins.
Sure. So I'm just thinking of, all of the reasons why people work. Some of it has to do with money, obviously, but there are many reasons people work. Facing down lower wage jobs, people do it because there are benefits that go beyond that. The employed lifestyle is a better one. There's a brighter future when you're working. You're more employable when you're employed. We've been able to teach that. People who work have higher self-esteems, and they are eligible for a range of transitional benefits, but rewarding that with an earnings boost from something like the EITC can create momentum, and it literally change a generation, and we should build on that.
Well, thank you. And I think just to put a fine point on this discussion, again, a lot of the argument is, well, changing to a cash payment welfare system is not going to stop people from working. It's not going to be a disincentive to work. Like I said, we had this debate back when President Clinton signed the bill that many of us in this room voted for, that did implement this. And then when the child tax credit was created, it incentivized work and was connected to work. The legislation we are now discussing is going to disconnect, again, these efforts at helping those who are in need the most from the work incentives. Could you just, either one of you, just indicate, did not the system work and work wonderfully? The one that President Clinton signed into law that most of us voted for and that we have followed in the concept as we established the CTC?
The increases in employment of single mothers during the 90s were historic. We saw about 1.2 million single mothers join the workforce that hadn't been working, and their employment was relatively stable before and after, so it's clear it was the changes in welfare through per wara and the expansions of the EITC that did it.
Thank you.
I thank my colleague. The only thing I